Good morning and welcome again to another one of my podcast interviews. And today I'm really excited to have Maria Vamvouklis with us. Maria is a founder and director of The Conscious CEO. And as a trainer of NLP, hypnosis, and timeline therapy, and a master NLP coach, Maria helps coaches, consultants, and service based businesses across various industries make a profound difference in their business and life. She uncovers and assists them in the understandings and the workings of the human psyche to reach the deeper structures of our unconscious mind to bridge the gap with business strategies. Maria has a deep passion and understanding of the workings of the human psychology that empowers her to reach the deeper structures of our unconscious mind and uncover what is hidden away from the conscious awareness of any individual's highest potential. And prior to entering into the business world, Maria was serving in the New South Wales Police Force, and before that as a natural health clinic for over 10 years. Outside of business, Maria volunteers as an Are You OK ambassador. That's a long list of accolades, Maria, and of various different industries. Like you sound like me. We've done various different things, from being in the police force to being, a naturopath to now being a coach in NLP. How did you sort of come across all those? So going from police force into natural health and then again into sort of the NLP work.
Yeah, I was actually a naturopath to start off with, and I worked in the health and fitness industry because I was a personal trainer as well. And I've got a deep passion for complementary medicine, and through my studies, I had a really great understanding in terms of the biochemistry and biology of the body and how we actually function. And then I went into the police force because I wanted to make a difference in another area within the community as well. So from there, I left, and then I became a NLP coach, and then I utilized my skills in natural therapies and put those together in creating another business from there. And now I just work as a trainer, so I certify people in those modalities as well as coach individual businesses to help build their businesses.
So I myself is in natural therapy, as you know, and so it is so important with the clients that we see, how, even with the NLP work you do along the lines of the whole mind-body medicine, and you touched on in your bio, the unconscious mind. So for those that don't understand what the unconscious mind is, could you just give us, a brief overview of what the unconscious mind is and how that affects our health?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, what is the unconscious mind? The unconscious mind is simply the part of you where all your beliefs, attitudes, emotions, both positive and negative, as well as your values as well, are stored at the unconscious level. And what that means is that if we think about every single little hair and fiber that moves on our body, if we were conscious about that happening on a daily basis, we would actually be overloaded with the things that do happen in our daily lives to us as individuals, where it actually runs our blueprint in order for us to function on a day-to-day basis. And the conscious mind is what we do consciously and what we're aware of in what's happening. So whether or not we're doing a particular task or activity that we're conscious of doing. The unconscious mind is what drives all our decision-making, all our behaviors, all our outcomes that we're producing from an unconscious level. In the way that it actually affects our health is that the decisions that we make in the context of health, whether that be positive or negative, is driven by our deep unconscious values in what's causing us to make those decisions. Now, if those behaviors aren't empowering or, say, positive, they can create a detrimental effect in terms of our overall general health that we're creating and moving through our daily life with.
So many people have those same thoughts. Like, you see day in and day out, these people are thinking, they're very anxious a lot of the time, and they're thinking, all these negative thoughts that just keep compounding, and they're thinking the same thoughts. They say that we think the same thoughts as we did yesterday, as the day before, and for over how long. So how can we change these thoughts over so that we are creating sort of better health? Because like you said, if it is affecting our health, and if you want to quickly discuss also the blueprint of our health, and you mentioned that the unconscious mind, basically has a picture of perfect health, how we can move towards, like for those who are suffering from illness or, have health concerns, how they can start getting their health back on track.
Yeah, and that's such a great question. And I think if everyone really understands this particular question and being the key to unlocking optimum health, because everyone can create optimum health. All health is a depletion of energy in the body. And if we think about like the mind-body connection, there are some people that only see physical symptoms as the epitome of what the body can do. But what actually drives a lot of our physical symptoms is what's happening within our own mind. And you mentioned negative emotions. And if we are producing negative emotions and not actually resolving what's actually driving, because negative emotions are literally the fuel of our behaviors. And if they are impoverished, let's say, they can get stored into the body, or what we call the neurology, the nervous system, and they actually manifest into a physical disease. So if we look at health and we look at a deeper structure of what health actually is, it's looking at how the mind functions and what's it actually telling us that we're not aware of, that we need to address, which therefore has manifested into a physical disease. A lot of people come to me and they say, I have a bad back, or I keep getting I have this autoimmune disease. It's really understanding, okay, well, what's been happening in your life, or what belief systems are you actually telling yourself or programming yourself in order to fuel what's happening with your physical condition? Are you taking actions that are empowering, or thought processes that are empowering, or simply making changes in your physical environment that is reducing toxins and toxicity? Because we're exposed to so many things within our environment nowadays, especially with technology, foods that we simply buy from the supermarket. There are so many processed foods that if we're not educated in a way to understand what the effects are of everything that's happening around us, we simply just go about in accepting those as true and what's normal, let's say. I think the biggest key here for individuals in terms of health is education. Get educated to be able to make well-informed decisions, to be able to take control of what's going in your mouth, what you're exposed to, but also reassess what are you actually saying to yourself and what beliefs are you actually running that's programming and fueling a lot of those health conditions moving forward.
Because most people will sort of go on and just think the same health condition, or just think the same thoughts day in and day out. So they actually have to have that awareness. So what are some things you could say to get people to have that awareness? Like, because you may not know you're even thinking that, like it's at an unconscious level, like you said. So having that awareness to go, oh, I'm actually thinking these thoughts, and then what they can do to like flip that script around, basically.
Yeah, sure. So becoming aware of what's happening within your own mind can be quite tricky in the beginning if you're not used to it. And I get a lot of clients that come to me that don't even realize that their thought processes are what they are, which is part of the problem. And a great way to get conscious about what's happening in your own head is to actually write down what's happening in that moment of emotion, to be able to distract the conscious mind and get it out and make what's happening that you're not aware of conscious, in order to take the next step in being able to address that problem. So for example, right, you might get someone that's trying to lose weight, and they've lost weight, they've done the health. This was quite common when I was working with individuals as a naturopath. They'll do the nutrition program, they'll follow it to a T, and they'll lose the weight, and then they'll complete the program, but they'll go off after the program for a number of weeks or months, and something would happen in their life or they'd say something to themselves which would trigger a sabotaging behavior, and then they'll go back into that yo-yo and onto that hamster wheel, let's say, of trying to be able to lose the weight. A common one, for example, with weight loss with women as a generalization, is the belief of not being good enough to be able to have what they want or be who they want. Now, if you are not aware of when that's happening, is to actually physically write it down, keep a journal of what that is. Now, this sounds quite cliche, but it's actually quite effective in terms of getting what's unconscious and becoming conscious. So writing that down. And the next step is to really understand what it is to learn from that, in being able to create a new empowering belief. Now, in number of the modalities that I teach, we remove those limitations with timeline therapy and also with neurolinguistic programming. But you can simply ask yourself a really great key question, and I give this as a resource to anyone that comes to me that feels stuck, is simply asking yourself, what is this teaching me? And why have I created this? And what is the positive that I can get from this moving forward?
So you're saying that our minds are basically sabotaging our results, like especially like say around weight loss as an example, that what they're thinking is actually preventing them. It might not be that then they feel guilty that they haven't done enough exercise or they've had that piece of cake. So it's not actually what they're eating, but it's the thoughts that they're telling themselves while they're eating that, and then having that guilty conscience that is actually, sabotaging the results or not getting them to get where they need to be.
Absolutely. Our mind is what drives our behaviors. And if we are not understanding in terms of what's happening within our own mind and what's happening within our own head, particularly our self-talk, once we understand that, then we can make changes in how we make decisions and do behaviors differently, and prevent us from sabotaging our outcomes or our results that we're wanting to achieve.
But that was such a good tip about writing down our thoughts, because how many of us really are writing them down? We're thinking, they say about 80,000 thoughts a day. And, how much are we actually writing down? Like we did think those, but the number of times we actually then catch ourselves and can flip that around and go, oh, okay, now I'm aware of that. And then the next time you're thinking that, you can catch yourself and not go down that spiral and keep going the same way that you were, days or weeks or months that you've been doing, right? So that we can get back on a different train of thought and go, how can we create a better future or change our behavior just through being aware of the thoughts that they're having?
And I think that's the key, is self-awareness. Majority of people nowadays are so disconnected from their own self that they're not aware of the thought processes that they're running on a daily basis. There was actually a study that was done by a psychologist, Penfolds. I think it was back in the 60s, and he actually counted, he did an experiment on himself, and he had a clicker, and he counted how many thoughts he actually had in one day, and it came to about 90,000 thoughts. Now, if we were conscious about those 90,000 thoughts, imagine how much more change we can actually create within our own self. Now, 90,000 thoughts is a lot, right? And this is why the unconscious mind works at an unconscious level, because we've got to be able to operate on a day-to-day basis and function. But a great way is that when you are actually in a place where you are not resourceful and you're doing self-sabotage, is making those thought processes conscious. And you can do this through journaling, or another way is through meditation. So whatever works for you, you just want to get it down on paper in a way to get that awareness in front of you, so you know what to do next in terms of the next steps.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Now, I just want to touch on a bit about, you mentioned on negative emotions, and, if we've had like sort of significant emotional events, how that can cause our behaviors to change, or can create like sort of a negative outcome of how we're going, because obviously significant emotional events can create massive disconnect, and we can be in our own world and we can be caught up in the same trauma or negative emotional event that can sabotage where we need to be in terms of our health, or our life in general. Doesn't have to be around the areas of health, but let's take health as an example. So those who've been through trauma or significant events, how does that affect a person's health and well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to backtrack a little bit in terms of negative emotions, there are 5 raw negative emotions, and that's anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt. Now, one might describe those with a different label, but essentially, the raw emotions are one of those 5 emotions. Now, when we experience those negative emotions, we get what we need to get in terms of the learnings or the new resources that we've gotten from it, and we're done with it. We move from it. So if you imagine yourself like in the future, and you've experienced something in the past, and you're like, oh, this is what I had to learn from that. I understand that. And it never bothered you again. That negative emotion from that specific significant emotional event or trauma, let's say, it does not get stored in the neurology. Now, there are some people that go through a significant trauma in their life and they don't deal with it. Now, what happens is that actually gets stored in the neurology and in some part of the body, and then gets expressed at a later time in order for the person to get what they need to get. Until they do, that actually comes up at a later time again until they address that problem. So a great example of that is when people say, oh, I'm so accident prone. It keeps happening to me. Or why does this keep happening to me? It's because the unconscious mind is telling that person, now's the time for you to deal with this. Do you want to deal with it, or do you want to ignore it? Some people ignore it. It goes back down, gets stored into the neurology again, and comes up at a later time. Now, in order to release these negative emotions, a great way is to get a coach, such as yourself or myself, and do a various technique like timeline therapy, which removes those negative emotions in a matter of minutes. That's how quick it is. The other way is to do a self-reflection and do the questioning. Ask yourself questions. What is this teaching me that's positive for my future? What is the purpose of this, and why have I created this? As soon as you take responsibility for what everything is happening outside of you, it gives you the power of your own personal power for you to come up with new solutions and resources in order to move past what has happened. They're commonly where people actually point the finger outside of them and go, it was this person's fault, or it was because of this and because of that. You're actually giving your personal power away and not giving yourself a chance to find new solutions and new ways of doing things differently, and letting go of those negative emotions from the past. So I think the biggest key takeaway here is, in order to release negative emotions, you need to take responsibility for what's actually happened to you in order to get what you need to get.
That's such a big, important point, because so many of us do not take responsibilities. And, we've all done it before, and we'll point the blame at someone else. But when we really look at it, it's like, okay, what did we contribute? Like, how did we create the problem? Like, it's not always outside of us. It always has to do with, the person themselves. And so many people, it's easier to point the blame and to point your finger at someone else than it is to look inside yourself and go, okay, what did I do wrong? How can I do it better next time? Or how am I at fault? So we never take, so many people, and I myself am guilty, but it's so much harder to realize your own responsibility in the problem than it is to just blame someone else for what didn't go right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going back to in the context of health, where people say, oh, I couldn't get up and do exercise, or I just didn't feel like eating this, or it was because I went to this social event and they didn't have healthy food.
Yeah.
You got to, like, if you want to take responsibility in terms of your outcome, is say, well, what can I do in order to continue moving forward in getting what I want?
Yeah.
That's it. Everyone just does their best in their own model of the world, and that's simply what people are doing. Yeah.
That's all empowerment and choice for yourself. Like if you want to have a life of optimal health and well-being and achieve, great health and be able to exercise and still have, a clear mind at like 90 years old, then we've got to move towards that. And all the choices, it's all about the small choices that we make in the moment. So how is that important, Maria? Sort of all the split choices that we make and having that awareness instead of just, doing the same thing day in and day out. It's having those small awarenesses and go, okay, how can I take control of this situation, and how can I, like you said, if you go to a party and they haven't got great food, or there's lots of alcohol, because I get that excuse all the time, oh, it was a Friday night drinks, or whatever it was, but no one's telling you to drink 6 beers or 6 glasses of wine, right? It's knowing when to make that awareness to take power back into your own hands, instead of saying, oh no, that was because of this person or X situation.
Yeah. And I think here it's great to ask yourself,
Yeah.
why is this important to me?
Yeah.
Because when you make decisions, it's not because you like something, it's because it's important to you.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you want to lose weight and you don't like exercising, you'll still exercise because you know it's important in order to achieve the outcome. So, if a person goes to a party and they don't have, healthy food, or they have alcohol, it's about, okay, well, what's important to me? Am I making a commitment to myself, or am I giving my personal power away and letting myself down? So it's about self-discipline and consistency in order to achieve the outcome. And I just want to reiterate, it's not about what people like or what you like. It's about, why is this important to me? Yeah.
Exactly. So it's all about the values. And at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
it's important to you. Like if it's important to you to grow old and be healthy and see a grandchild, you'll do whatever it takes to make sure you're in that optimal health. So it all comes down to what they value as being important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Maria. It's been such a great talk, and you've given some amazing tips. What would be one last thing that you could tell our viewers, sort of how we can, create the optimal health that we want at the end of the day?
Yeah, sure. So I believe optimal health is not necessarily just the physical
Yeah.
body. It's about the mind, body, and spirit, connecting the three. So make sure that you are creating optimal health within your physical body. You're creating optimal mind within your mind, in whatever way that might be. That might be simply just catching those negative thoughts, or those sabotaging phrases that you might say, and then saying something that will replace it in a much more empowering, positive way. And then spirit, whatever that might be for you, it might be through meditation, it might be through some other practice. But remember, there are 3 bodies, not just the one.
That is a great tip to take away, because we forget about the mind and the spirit. We concentrate on the physical body, but it does start from the mind, which touched on at the beginning. All right, Maria, that was so informative, and I'm sure we'll hear more from Maria again. So thank you so much for jumping on and giving the listeners some great tips.
Thanks, Ellie. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
Maria.